Welcome, everyone. Next, it's my great pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Pushmeet Kohli. I think to this audience, Pushmeet probably doesn't need much of introduction. He's VP of our Science and Strategic Initiative, and also Chief Scientist of Google Cloud. He has been leading our science team since the inception, and has guided the enormous breakthrough in our team from AlphaFold and others. I'm sure you're going to hear from that. I'm really delighted when he accepted our invitation because obviously as an employee at Google DeepMind, we benefit a lot from his guidance. And I think it's very valuable for him to also share these insights with the broader audience. Please join me to give a warm welcome to Pushmeet.
Thanks, everyone. It's great to be back in some sense, although this is my first visit to the campus. I don't know if many of you might know, I lived for 10 years in Cambridge, right next door in Great Shelford. So I know the area really well, and really sort of great to see the plans for the whole sort of how the center is going to expand. It's very exciting, and it's one of the best sort of parts of the world to actually do science and research, and I'm really happy how things are sort of shaping up. As was mentioned, I lead the science program at DeepMind. So I don't know many of you how much of you know about DeepMind, but I'll still mention an introduction. So DeepMind started with this mission of building AI responsibly to benefit humanity, and it was founded in London in 2010. Demis, Shane, and Mustafa, and over the last 16 years, it has gone through a different trajectory and has seen the development of AI from what was a very research-focused program to something that is actually changing the world in a very significant way. To describe DeepMind, I sort of generally described it in 3 phases. The first phase of DeepMind was proving that thesis that you can have machines which can learn from experience and exhibit intelligence that goes beyond human knowledge. And it might sort of appear quite a non-controversial statement to make at this point of time, but it was not so easy to explain when the organization was started. And the first sort of key milestone in that first phase was that legendary match in Seoul in South Korea, where the DeepMind system AlphaGo played Lee Sedol, the world Go champion. And I don't know how many of you have seen the documentary or that game? Like, hands up? So quite a few, but not everyone. I think there was this moment in the match where AlphaGo played move 37. And everyone in the audience and the commentators felt, oh, what a silly mistake this agent is making. It clearly shows that AI systems are not able to exhibit the kind of intuition that is needed to play this game, and that's only sort of human. And only as the game progressed, suddenly they realized that that move 37 was not a mistake. It was an amazingly sort of insightful move that the agent had played, and it impacted how sort of game theory sort of was written, because it was a move that was considered something that you would never do, right? And so that proof point of these systems that being capable of discovering knowledge that changes and that expands humanity's sort of knowledge and understanding about a particular concept, I think that was a key sort of moment in that journey. Now, having done that, the second sort of part was, now how do you leverage this? And so I've always been sort of personally been excited about understanding the world and sort of having technology have impact in a beneficial way in the world. So that's when basically I joined DeepMind. In fact, Demis had asked me to join DeepMind much earlier, and I had said no. I said, well, you are interested in, I really like the team and the culture and the philosophy, but I'm not into games. I play them, but I don't want to solve games. I'm more into sort of practical things. But after the Go match, the phase 2 of DeepMind was all about, now that we have proven this thesis, we now need to use it for amazing impact and especially in science. So that's when I joined DeepMind, and we started the science program, and that phase 2 sort of the key milestone of phase 2 was AlphaFold 2, which many of you sort of might have used. And then now we are living through phase 3 of DeepMind, which is now that we have shown that you can not only have these special case models that can exhibit superhuman performance in games and also in beneficial applications in understanding biology, can we make a general sort of model that can exhibit insight, intuition, and improve in many different tasks, right? Which is what we are now developing with Gemini. So when we were thinking about going for AI for science, the key question was, how do you select problems? Because science is so broad, and we were a sort of relatively small team of around 6 to 7 researchers, and like science, you can do all of science, right? You can take problems in biology, in physics, in chemistry, in mathematics, and so we needed an algorithm to figure out what are the key things that we are going to target. And the algorithm that we came up on had these requirements. The first requirement was, look at a problem and make sure that everyone in the community sort of felt that this problem is going to be transformative. That if this problem, if it is solved, it will have a transformative impact. There should be almost a consensus in the community that this is a transformative problem. The second sort of expectation is that there should also be some sort of a consensus that this problem is inevitable. The solution of it is inevitable in the sense that we don't want to work on something which is completely impossible. We don't want to work on time travel or something, right, and waste our time. The third condition was that everyone in the community, there should also be somewhat of a consensus that this problem, which is going to be transformative, it's going to be inevitable, like whether it happens in sort of 10 years or 20 years or 100 years, it will be solved one day. It is not going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years. Okay, so why that third condition? The third condition was, we did not want to work on low-hanging fruit. If there was a problem that a professor in Cambridge or Oxford or MIT or Zurich or Barcelona was working on, we did not want to touch that problem. We wanted to work on problems that require the unique sort of features that DeepMind has, which is multidisciplinary teams which are really going after a problem for a long, long period of time. Right? So our team size, we wanted to make sure that the problems are hard enough for us to fully sort of leverage all the key things that we have in the team and and approach them in a mission-focused way. So what does mission-focused execution mean? So when someone joins the team, I sort of explain it to them that typically when you are in academia, you are a PI and you have students and postdocs. But when you join DeepMind, everyone is a PI, because all the people in the team are selected to be specialists, are people who are really at the top of their sort of field. And then you are essentially building these collaborative projects with a set of PIs. And one of the first things that that first challenge that you sort of see when you're working together as a team is figuring out what is the right metric that we should be sort of solving? Because people have different views, and I mean, yes, every metric is sort of wrong in some way, but we want to make sure that people could agree that it is worth us to collaborating together on this one thing which really makes a difference. The second important thing was we really wanted to focus on good engineering as well as good ideas. The idea, sometimes basically in research, what happens is you have to sort of figure out novelty in terms of the techniques. And novel ideas are, of course, interesting and useful and so on. But sometimes when you really want to solve the problem, it's not just about sort of novel ideas, it's about bringing all the good ideas, which might not be novel, working well in a combined system. So we really wanted to make sure that we are focusing on sort of end-to-end building the system rather than just coming up with novel ideas. The third element was understanding that if you're trying to build intelligence, if you're trying to build intuition, that does not happen in a vacuum. You don't basically sit in a room and without any sort of knowledge or experience, you get sort of knowledge. Knowledge comes from experience. And that experience is in the form of what data that you sort of what data that you have, whether it has been collected through experiments or whether you have collected that data through simulations. And so data is the key raw material for AI, and I think we really wanted to sort of make a science of how do we leverage the right data. And this is now true even for LLMs, where people have sort of looked at scaling laws, and that has sort of really taken the field much further. And then finally, validation. You need mechanisms to be able to say, how are you making progress? That once you have sort of solved the problem, can you really sort of quantify that the problem has been solved? And this is where things like the CASP assessment were super critical, because they gave us a mechanism to do a sort of blind evaluation of true progress in the field. And with this philosophy, over the last sort of 9 years, we have now taken on grand challenges across a number of different domains, from biology to energy and materials, maths and computer science, geospatial intelligence, and agents for science. So I'll sort of focus on biology. And I think the key thing about biology was one of the first sort of projects that we took on. And for us, in some sense, both sort of Demis and I feel that, like in some sense, biology is like the perfect application for AI. It's so sophisticated, it's so complicated, and in some sense, it tests the human mind's ability to sort of make sense of it. So I think that this is, if humans needed sort of help in understanding sort of a problem, then biology is the key problem for us to understand. So over the last sort of many years, we have been looking at various sort of problems in biology. The first being understanding proteins, the building blocks of life. And we started with predicting 3D structure of proteins, which resulted in AlphaFold, predicting their function. How do you sort of understand what these proteins are doing, the role that they play, and then can we sort of also design new proteins to solve different sort of functional elements, right? So to design new binders or design new sort of functional enzymes and so on. The second sort of key grand challenge was understanding the recipe of life, understanding the genome. Like as was mentioned, we have been able to sequence the human genome, but we understand this language of life. We can read that language of life, but do we really understand it, right? And can we understand the semantics of the genome? So this is the other sort of grand challenge that we sort of started sort of trying to predict the impact of missense and non-coding variants across the human genome and other genomes for that matter. And finally, like moving further, really building a virtual cell. Can we really simulate biology so that we can understand what are the processes that are happening in the cell? Can we predict all the kinase substrate interactions? Can we understand the grammar of cell sort of state, like if you introduce this transcription factor, what happens to the cell state, and so on? Can you predict everything that is happening in a cell? So I'll start with sort of AlphaFold 2 because this is the most sort of famous element. And what does it do? It basically goes from a sequence describing a protein, and this block that you see, there was a lot of engineering that went into developing this architecture, and it finally sort of resulted in the 3D structure. I think the important element that, like it was at that point of time sort of not at all sort of clear how much progress this would we would be making on this problem. If you are looking at this problem in 2016, when or end of 2016 or early 2017, when we were starting the project, it was not at all clear that you will hit the 90 GDT mark on CASP. It's now in hindsight, it looks sort of, yes, they were you can make progress, but even after sort of AlphaFold 1, which came out in 2018, like the team had to completely abandon the architecture for AlphaFold 1 and build a completely new architecture to go after AlphaFold 2, because we saw how difficult it was to sort of make progress on even like 5 GTT. Like improvement was incredibly sort of hard. And of course, the impact of AlphaFold was very clear because we were doing this work, especially for AlphaFold 2, at the height of the pandemic. And when sort of sequences from SARS-CoV-2 came out, and we were seeing like the world over, people trying to understand all the sort of proteins. The spike protein everyone sort of knew about, but the accessory proteins, people did not know the structure. And the fact that we could sort of find the structures of those accessory proteins like ORF8 and sort of share them with the scientists really showed the potential impact of this technology. And so over the last sort of 5 years or 6 years since AlphaFold 2 has sort of come out, what has really surprised me is not just the breakthroughs that it has resulted in, but how much it has been used. If you, in 2017, when we were starting the project, you would have told me that there are 3.3 million users of AlphaFold database, I would not have believed you. There are sometimes people get down about the state of the world and like all the wars that are happening and so on. But if you want one positive story about the world, the story is that there are 3.3 million people on this planet who are studying protein structures. That is an amazing thing, right? That 3.3 million people are using AlphaFold database across the world. We don't see it that way, right? Like we normally don't encounter people sort of really sort of talking about like what is the structural conformation of this particular protein on a bus or a train. But there are 3.3 million people like us who are interested in science. And so that is the most sort of rewarding thing that I can sort of think of. Like, of course, the 40,000 citations and the Nobel Prize and so on are rewarding, but I think that usage number is what really sort of, as they say, floats my boat. And of course, one thing to sort of remember is that Demis and John shared the Nobel, but the broader sort of team that was behind it, right? It was a real sort of collective team effort of a lot of people who came together to make this this project sort of work, and this would not have been possible without the data from the PDB, the assessments from the CASP competition, and without MLEBI to sort of advise us on how do we sort of share this. So partnerships, data, validation, and that whole engineering sort of team spirit is extremely sort of critical to making these grand challenges and moonshots a success. So what were the lessons from AlphaFold? I think there were two sort of key lessons. That when you're thinking about these machine learning and AI models, you really have to sort of look at not only the strengths of the model, but also the weaknesses. Even if AlphaFold did not have 90 GDT, but had 95 GDT, but its uncertainty was completely broken. Like you would get a result and you would have no idea whether that is a valid result or not. People would have sort of thought about twice before using it. The fact that AlphaFold, when it was making mistakes, when it is making mistakes, can tell you that it's uncertain about certain predictions, I think was extremely sort of crucial. So that was one sort of lesson. The other lesson is that the true power of an AI and machine learning system is its ability to generalize. Otherwise, it's basically just memorizing stuff, and that's not very impressive. Sometimes that can be useful, but I think the true power is in generalization. And one such example of generalization is that when we shared AlphaFold 2, people sort of told us that, when they looked at the predicted uncertainty of AlphaFold 2, it was the state-of-the-art predictor for disorder in protein structures. And this is something that we had never trained AlphaFold to do. And it just emerged from its training, that it could generalize to this new problem without having been trained on it, and being the state of the art on that problem. So true intelligence is not in its ability to memorize, but its ability to generalize and sort of explain sort of concepts. And so over the last many years, the story did not stop with AlphaFold 2. We carried on the work with AlphaFold 3, extended the structural characterization work beyond protein structures to more general biomolecules, RNA, DNA, how do the structures of complexes, and so on. And then like spun off a lot of this work with the Isomorphic Labs, which is now taking this work to accelerate drug discovery across a number of disease elements, and they are growing as well, as you might have heard in the news. So I think it's a great sort of story about the whole UK and European biological sort of prowess. We have, of course, been working on further expanding the abilities, so working on sort of de novo protein design, leveraging some of the lessons from AlphaFold 2, and in fact some of the models as well with AlphaFold 3. And this is sort of again sort of showing quite impressive results, not only for finding binders with much higher success rates, but also finding binders which have much higher sort of binding affinity, right? And they can work with sometimes nanomolar or picomolar sort of concentrations. So all of this work just shows that we are taking AI is basically helping us do a lot of the work in silico and move much faster. And then, of course, validation is needed to sort of really find the final solutions. Now, coming to the sort of genetics part and genomics part, we have been working on both AlphaMissense, like with which Jun actually sort of led on basically taking the AlphaFold model and its inspiration and using it for predicting missense variants, and then following up with the Alpha Genome, which sort of does variant effect prediction, like splicing, gene expression. And so these are sort of key developments on the genomic side of things. Alpha Genome, just to give you sort of a key snapshot. If you have more questions, the team, Jun and a number of Josh, a number of people are here from the team, so you can ask them sort of key details of the question. But I think the key characteristics of the model is that it is a truly long context model with 1 mega base pairs sort of context length, and it works at the base pair resolution. And I think these two sort of key elements are unprecedented in terms of its ability to make predictions about these multimodal phenotypes, like transcription and splicing and so on. And if you look at its performance, like across the best known sort of models for across a large number of both sequence tasks as well as variant effect tasks, you see a general sort of uplift across the board. Across RNA expression, splicing, DNA accessibility, histone modifications, you really see that it's not just a model that has been fine-tuned on one single task. It shows a generalized improvement across a whole spectrum of different things, which is what you would sort of expect from a model that is able to transfer and generalize across the biological modalities. And not only is it sort of something that is performing well, again, as we sort of learned the lesson from AlphaFold 2, the key impact of the model is making it available more accessibly and more broadly. And so Alpha Genome, we released the API, which can be used by researchers, and we also shared the model weights. And then it's really sort of heartening to see sort of researchers building on top of AlphaFold. So the fine-tuning work by the Ku lab and the Kundaje lab, that has been really good. And the fact that now there's a PyTorch port, it really shows how the whole community is building on top of these models. And I would like to sort of now take a moment to share how we are sort of expanding this further. As I mentioned, that data is the critical sort of piece. So for this part, I'll invite Julia from the Sanger Institute to come and join me. Data is basically the key ingredient for training all of these different models, from AlphaFold to Alpha Genome. And we are really sort of happy that we are starting this consortium with a broad partnership with the Sanger Institute, with Google.org, to expand the amount of data that we can gather for genomics research, and for really training models on and showing the next level of capabilities of these models. So, Julia.
Thank you, Pushmeet. It's great to be here today to launch this consortium with you. The Sanger Institute is a mission-driven organization. We want to explore and apply genomic technologies to advance understanding of biology and improve human health. And over the next 5 years, in partnership, we plan to build the data backbone needed to decode complex biological processes to accelerate scientific discovery. At the Sanger Institute, we've seen firsthand how powerful large-scale genomic data can be in driving scientific advances and opening new fields of research. So by bringing together expertise in genomics, in intentional AI-ready data, and machine learning, we hope to make genomics more predictive, and open up new avenues for scientific research, and ultimately benefit society. So this partnership builds on an existing and exciting relationship between the Sanger Institute and Google DeepMind. We've got previous research collaborations, but both organizations take a wider view of science and society, and we're also committed to training the next generation of genomics and AI scientists. And earlier this year, we announced an AI fellowship, a joint AI and genomics fellowship together. And we're also working on joint AI training initiatives, because we're committed to democratizing the distinctive genomic research and AI science that we can do together. And we want to take these capabilities beyond our two organizations. So we're looking forward to working with Google DeepMind and others as this consortium takes shape, and on our shared effort to strengthen AI capability and help this evolve over the current years. So thank you, Pushmeet, for this opportunity. and I'll leave you to go back to this fascinating presentation.
Thanks, Julia. So it's we are really sort of Thanks everyone. We are really excited about this partnership, and I think this new data repository will not only sort of expand our research, but I think will expand research across the globe on this very important problem. Now, changing sort of gears, I wanted to sort of talk more broadly on where we are in the AI ecosystem and what does this mean for science. Now, when you think about sort of science, when we see sort of these models like AlphaFold and AlphaGenome, these are sort of models which are working on specialized problems that really sort of the scientific community sort of knows are important and will change how things are can change how things are done. But if you look at science much more broadly and look at all the sort of activities of science, science involves a lot of different things, right? It involves data extraction and data curation. You want to understand, you want to capture data around the world. There's a lot of the work that we do as sort of researchers and scientists is basically doing literature surveys, understanding what is coming out, doing data analysis, coming up with new ideas, and then finally sort of there is this idea of experimental intuition, this remarkable sort of superhuman ability to predict what would be the result for an experiment without actually doing it. And if you sort of think about the models that we have seen so far, like AlphaFold and AlphaGenome, they sort of span on this spectrum on the experimental intuition part, right? They tell us basically what kind of results we might expect to see and so on. But on these other sort of two parts, I think there is a revolution happening in general purpose AI models, really expanding our ability to move fast on science. So I'll give you sort of an example. On data extraction, what we are seeing that modern LLMs, so this is a result from our LLM Gemini, they are able to extract and curate structured data sets from thousands of papers, right? So what would have taken sort of a team of researchers multiple years to sort of curate data from a number of sort of papers or from all the papers in a particular field can now be done in a matter of a few hours by the agent working autonomously. And that really expands what researchers can do. There is another sort of revolution that is happening, and you might have heard in the news on how AI is affecting coding, right? So all these large sort of valuation increases of AI startups and so on partly have been driven by the effectiveness of modern LLMs in assisting sort of as coding agents. And what we are seeing is that these agentic coding sort of platforms like Google Antigravity and many others, when you augment them with scientific sort of tools and scientific skills, the ability to say sort of reach out and use the AlphaFold database or Interpro or protein sequence similarity search and so on, they start becoming a programmable research workbench. And so what we did is basically we collected a bunch of these skills across genomics, proteomics, and the scientific literature, and made these available to these coding agents. And now these coding agents can be used by researchers to really expand and accelerate their own sort of research paradigms. But the agents are not just basically speeding things up, they are actually discovering new things. So if you look at the scientific sort of history of these specialized agents to do discovery, we have been working on this problem for many years. We started this work. The first result that we actually released was the Alpha Tensor agent. And this agent was much inspired from the original successes like AlphaGo in being able to search over large search spaces. And what alpha tensor sort of found was it was able to discover sort of new algorithms that had not been sort of seen before. And over the last 3 years, what we have seen is that these agents have become extremely more powerful in their ability to search, but also much more general in the types of problems that they can solve. So they've become sort of more effective in many different applications. Here's an example. This is the problem of matrix multiplication, right? This is something that you would sort of have learned in school in linear algebra. And it's a very simple sort of problem. You want to multiply two matrices, like these A matrix and the B matrix, and get the C matrix. And in order to sort of do that, you need 8 multiplications, right? These H1 to H8 are the 8 multiplication operations that you need to do, which are then combined to get the final sort of result. And this problem is so fundamental. Almost every AI system is based on neural networks these days, and neural networks, the basic operation of a neural network is matrix multiplication. But it's not just neural networks. A lot of the sort of modern computing is based on matrix multiplication, image processing, even sort of how you're doing encryption. Everything is basically can be seen as multiplying matrices and so on. Now, you would say this fundamental problem, very, very sort of simple but fundamental problem in computer science, computer scientists would have sort of made sense of it, like how to do it best. Right? Like this would be completely understood, and you would be mistaken, because this standard algorithm, there was a German mathematician, Strassen, in 1969 was trying to prove that the fastest way to multiply matrices in terms of the number of multiplications was 8, right, for this 2 by 2 matrix. But he found that in fact, surprisingly, it was 7. And he came up with this sort of algorithm, and this really sort of confused the whole sort of community, because then it sort of brought this question, well, what is the best way you can multiply matrices? And these are such basic fundamental operations in computer science. And this problem stayed open for more than 50 years, until we asked one of our agents to find something which is better than this Strassen algorithm on the right. And it did find something. It found this algorithm. Now, I don't know about you, but I can certainly would have not been able to come up with this algorithm. And this shows the power, the superhuman ability of these models to sort of reason and search in spaces that we wouldn't be able to sort of search. And that is that sort of non-human ability is, I think, is something that we need to leverage in problems which are really difficult and where we are seeing the limits of human reasoning. And now we have more general models which can just search in the space of programs. They are so you give them a task and they sort of start writing code to be able to find the better solution for this task. And this is not just scientific work. We are actually applying it in commercial applications, and from data center optimization, hardware optimization, like designing the new chips, and even sort of training these machine learning models. And what you're seeing is that they can produce very significant sort of impact. So imagine all the sort of trillions of dollars that is being spent on data center development, and this single agent was able to save 0.7% of the overall sort of data center sort of compute. Can you imagine like the actual magnitude of that sort of amount by just one agent running? And now we are seeing this sort of applied to science itself. We have these agents which can sort of which can when given a problem, are able to do massive search in the space of literature and come up with sort of interesting ideas. It sort of once you're given a problem, it takes the research goal, sort of generates ideas, reviews those ideas, refines those ideas, and sort of finally gets the overall result. And the main sort of thing with these agents is that as you give them more time, they are able to get better. They're able to define much more interesting ideas and so forth. And people have been using it across. So we have been sharing this with scientists, and they have been using it for a number of different applications, from drug repurposing for AML, understanding targets for liver fibrosis, understanding sort of gene transfer mechanisms in bacteria for understanding AMR. And, and these are not just experiments. These are resulting in scientific publications, which have now been peer-reviewed and submitted. And so this is an example from one of the scientists, Dr. Jose Pandes from Imperial, on his reaction to when he saw the results. So he was working on, his team were working on this problem for the last 10 years. They submitted a paper to Cell. This was confidential. Nobody knew about it. And then we asked him to use co-scientist, and he gave the same problem to co-scientists, and co-scientists basically produced almost the same result in sort of a matter of days than that the team had found in 10 years. So this was a reaction.
You came up with the answer in 2 days that it had taken you around 10 years to find. What was your reaction?
My reaction, I was shopping with somebody. It was a Saturday afternoon. I was shopping with somebody, and I said, please leave me alone for 1 hour. I need to digest this thing. And then the first thing I said is, I wrote an email to Google, said, you have access to my computer, is that right? Because otherwise...
You thought they were cheating?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Because and also, sometimes I use ChatGPT or whatever for improving my English also. You have access to this chart. He said, no way, this is so best. It's not just that the top hypothesis they provide was the right one, okay? It's that they provide another 4, and all of them made sense. And even for one of them, we never thought about it, and we are now working on that.
So, I mean, you can see the potential of these sort of tools for science, and we are not just sort of, these are not prototypes and so on. We are actually making these tools available now across the board. So if you go to this link, we share 3 types of tools: literature insights, which can really extract data from across the scientific literature, allows you to sort of do data curation; hypothesis generation, which is based on co-scientists, which Dr. Pandes was talking about; and computational discovery, which is similar to the AlphaEvolve sort of demo that I showed you about, which can discover new algorithms and in fact do even sort of novel, it can even train new machine learning models for your data analysis tasks. So this brings us to the natural question, which I get asked, well, you are automating sort of many different elements of science. So what is the future for science, and what is the future for scientists? And I think I am really optimistic about the future of science and the future of scientists. Because what these sort of models and agents do, they solve the how problem, in the sense that once they all require the problem to be specified, and then they can help us in solving the problem. But in all our experience, when we are sharing these mathematical agents with mathematicians or with biologists, the key challenge has been finding the right problem and articulating the right problem well. And I think that will be the role of scientists in the future, because that is something that is deeply sort of human, understanding what is it that the scientific community wants to understand, what is the problem that will really impact society at large. This is something that we think that scientists will need to focus on, and of course the validation part as well. Right, really sort of capturing how do you assess that you have understood what you were looking for. These things will become sort of modern day sort of tools for really accelerating the process of science, but the key scientific questions will need to come from the scientists. And then the second sort of question I wanted to sort of leave you with is, how do you now facilitate beneficial applications. This is the ability to do science will be broadened by access to these tools. This is like a superpower. Many people will be able to do research with much more more speed and much more effectiveness. And how do we make sure that all that increased effectiveness and speed goes towards the more positive uses rather than the bad uses that can also be enabled with that power? And that is, I think, something that we as a scientific community need to think very carefully. How do we sort of build the right mechanisms and the right protocols to make that happen? Now, other communities like nuclear and so on, they have been thinking about it in a different way. The biology community has taken a very sort of informed view when it has looked at other powerful technologies like CRISPR and so on. But this technology, the key issue with this technology is it's sort of how many people will have access to it, right? And so it will introduce its own sets of sort of unique challenges, and we are working on some elements of that as well. But this is something that this community will really need to think about as we move towards really understanding the carbon substrate more broadly and thinking about how do we leverage the whole, like I think we have been in the silicon sort of age, but I think we are moving to the carbon age with this new expanded understanding of biology. So my concluding thought is we are at the start of an incredible new era of scientific progress with by leveraging these tools. And this era will bring amazing opportunities for us to solve many of the challenges that we are thinking about, like the key problem, the key diseases that we want to tackle, like cancer, the key global challenges like biosecurity, like energy security, like climate change. All of these challenges, we will have a tool that can help us make progress on these things. But at the same time, there will be sort of risks. And so we really need to think about what are the ways that we should bring this bring these tools and this technology across the world. So I'll stop with that. Thank you.
Q&A box below the live session.
Hello, thank you for your talk. I have one main question and one cheeky question. So the main question is, if you were going to organize an after-school club for children in primary school now, what would be the key skills that you think children now will need? And very quickly, did you show your matrix factorization to a mathematician, and what did they think about it?
Yeah, so I think this is something that people don't realize, right? That if you wanted to talk to a specialist in the world, you would have very few people that you will have access to, right? So people who know genomics and people who are interested in I don't know, some manga, for instance. These are completely different sort of things, right? Manga, a Japanese sort of creative art, and genomics. You will have very few people at the intersection of those two interest groups. Now with these agents, you have something which is able to have amazing sort of knowledge of manga, of like a very specialized sort of understanding of coffee making, and very specialized understanding of genomics and protein structure prediction. So why am I bringing these sort of topics up? Is because multidisciplinary research is going to become an incredibly easier thing to do. And so if I'm giving advice to people, is that learn new concepts, learn new vocabulary, because you will be able to speak with these agents in different vocabulary in a way that you would have never been able to do. So these tools will give you the ability to explore concepts that typically you would have never had the chance to sort of explore together. And so understanding different sort of fields, having an understanding of biology, going deep into various different disciplines at the same time and connecting them together, I think that will be the key opportunity of leveraging these tools effectively. So my advice to sort of to anyone who is now sort of coming into the field, who is learning, is that go deep into problems. Because you will be able to sort of, you will have these people who you will be able to, these tools that you can basically converse with and find useful, rather than you being the only person on the planet who knows, who is a specialist on manga and genomics, right? The second thing is basically to use these tools, because you want to understand their strengths but also their weaknesses. Only by truly playing around with these tools, you know that. Because like they are not perfect, they are imperfect, they make mistakes, they hallucinate, and the ability to sort of distinguish what is a hallucination from a true insight, I think that is the skill that scientists will need to have, and that is the skill that people will need to have. Not just for science, for even coding and many other sort of applications, you will need to have that understanding of distinguishing between hallucinations and true insights. And what the second question? The matrix. Yes, so we shared this with, of course, we published this work. It appeared in Nature, and it really sort of it created a lot of interest in the mathematics community. By the way, the mathematics community, I can tell you, some elements of them were very skeptical about AI. When we started this work, like around 6 or 7 years back. And I have to say, they are the community which have also taken this up in the most expanded way now. So the use of AI across mathematics is becoming extremely ubiquitous, and like they as a community have sort of taken up these agents much more broadly and much more quickly than I would have imagined.
We can take a live online question for next.
You will also need people doing the work manually to train the AI, as this at the moment comes from humans.
Can you repeat the question?
Yes, you will also need always people doing the work manually to train the AI models, as at the moment you can.
Yes. So of course, I mean, I think there is this element of sort of training these models and curating the right data sets and making sure that the right sort of information is fed into the model. And I think that there will be, we will need those people as well. But I think the majority of the work will be in basically coming up with the right specification, coming with the right sort of problem. To give you another sort of example, a few years back, we developed this agent called AlphaProof. And what AlphaProof was able to do was, for the first time, come up with proofs of problems that appeared in the International Maths Olympiad. Now, these are very hard problems. They are for sort of school level students, but these are not typical school level students. These are really mathematical sort of prodigies that sort of take part in the Maths Olympiad. Like, if you give me some of the harder problems, I'll not be able to do them. And when we looked at, when we applied the agent on solving these problems, we had to translate the problem into this formal language called Lean. And we realized that most of the times the error, the problem in sort of achieving the right solution was in the misspecification of the problem rather than in the solution of the agent. Like mathematicians, when we were framing the problem in the more precise way, we were making sort of mistakes. And so the agent will solve the problem, but it was not the problem that was asked. So, so I think sort of coming up with sort of good specifications of what is the right biological problem or the chemistry problem or the math problem, that will be the majority of the work that will be needed. And of course, there will be work in sort of gathering the right data and the validation piece on making sure that the final results are valid and we can extract things that are understood by human scientists.
Hello. Thank you for your talk. I have questions about the co-scientists and the hypothesis generation. Just now we mentioned about the matrix multiplication. It's quick turnaround time, easy to verifiable through speed and accuracy. How do you think it will take when you put in a biological domain where the questions are more open-ended, we don't have good verifiable results at like intermediate steps and not into the end? Do you have any insights on perhaps benchmarks or something like that that could make sure that you're actually generating novel but highly probable hypotheses rather than just creating more experiments and more lab?
Yeah, yeah, I think it's a very good question, and I think the key thing, and some of it is already happening, is that there is a lot of development that is happening on automated labs. And you can imagine sort of agents, agents having the ability to also validate some of the predictions using experimental techniques. So I think that is something that is a trend that you will see, right? That with sort of automated labs and high throughput labs, you will be able to validate some of the predictions and get much more quickly an assessment of whether the predictions are actually valid or not. But the more broader sort of question, like in many cases, things will be much more difficult, right? Like you can't do biological experiments basically work at the speed of biology, right? So if you want to sort of you want to measure a phenotype which in biology will just take a lot more time, you have to wait, right? So in those cases, I think we will need to come up with surrogate models that can work in silico, which can really sort of figure out whether the things that are being predicted are correct or not. And this is another example that, I mean, one example of this already in action is in our protein design work. So in protein design, in the protein design system, you say, I want to bind to this target, right? And so AlphaFold basically comes up, or the sequence search sort of comes up with a protein, and then you have many filters that you check in silico to see if the protein is actually valid. You run AlphaFold on it, see whether the structure makes sense. You run many other sort of property predictors which say is the protein that is being suggested by this AI model, will it have the same sort of characteristics? So what we will see is basically the development of many more of such specialized models which will be able to verify and specify the properties of what you are looking for.
Very great talk, Dr. Kohli. It was very insightful and very encouraging. One of my first, I got very emotional when AlphaFold first came out and seeing that video about like how it solved the grand challenge in biology, like much earlier than what we expected, like at least 50 years ahead of its time. So as an employee at Wellcome Sangre Institute, I would be very interested in getting more involved with some of the work at DeepMind. And you mentioned the AI consortium partnership. Would you be able to share a little bit more about like how someone at Sangre can get more involved with the work that you all do at DeepMind?
Yeah,
Please,
absolutely. I mean, I would say basically contact Julia. And she should be basically able to sort of mention. Julia, do you want to add something? I think they have a mic.
Yes, I mean, this is day one. We've just announced this partnership, but absolutely we're planning to have co-create projects together. So myself would be the contact point, and we'll work on on some light touch ways to get some immediate projects started together, but they'll be co-created between Sanger scientists and Google DeepMind scientists, and where we'll both benefit from the data and the results.
I think Yussi had a question.
Thank you so much, Pushmeet, for that great talk. I wanted to ask you about longer-term impact of AI on education. So for the new PhD students, people hardly code in the technical labs anymore, like in the CS departments, and like they use agentic AI. And so how would you see this, like for the new PhD? So what should they learn? And
I think basically skills and education, they need to be considered as a first-class sort of problem. So when we had calculators, we did not sort of expect people to forget addition and multiplication, right? They were specifically, I think we need to assess people's ability to reason about code without these agents sometimes, right? So this element of resilience is something that needs to be studied in education in a sort of thoughtful way. But I think, which is why I was sort of saying that there are risks. Education, there are a lot of positive things that can come from AI in education, because it really can scale up education. Like the kind of concepts that you can learn now very easily with these agents is like amazing. But at the same time, if people lose skills, that will be a risk. And so we need to sort of figure out what are the right ways to ensure that that doesn't happen. Like even in assessments, educators need to sort of come up with mechanisms where the students are sort of tested on their ability to leverage the agents, but also in ways where they do not have access to the agents, and whether they have the sort of key components to be able to sort of perform the task without the help of the agents.
Do you have any limitation on using agents in DeepMind?
No, I mean we use agents all the time, but at the same time, like if you're in an interview sort of context, right, you will be sort of there's also an element, the agent produces something and it might be wrong, and if you don't have that understanding of figuring out what is a hallucination and what is the right result, then you will not be able to do your job, right?
Yeah. Okay. Awesome.
I think Yussi had a question.
I guess for science and for many practical tasks in general, the LLMs tend to think in a correlative way. So I guess in math you have to really have the lean to provide the logical framework so that the AI doesn't go completely off the rails. So what are the prospects of having kind of lean for the real world on the agent, so it actually checks mechanistically whether its ideas make any sense? Because often if you try to do something practical with the LLM, it will suggest something completely mad.
Yeah, so I think this is what has happened. I think this is the more sort of recent sort of development in the last sort of couple of years. What we have seen is the agents having the ability to self-correct and self-check their reasoning. So in IMO 24, in the International Math Olympiad 24, we had a lean-based agent, which basically was able to verify at every check whether the proof was correct or not. In the International Math Olympiad last year, the LLM agents that solved those International Math Olympiad problems and in fact achieved gold medal performance compared to the silver medal performance we had got in 24 were not using lean at all. They were able to self-check by doing thinking and by basically critiquing their own work. They were able to sort of come up with proofs, very long proofs of solutions, and they were all sort of correct because every step was basically being assessed by another, by the agent in its, by thinking through it. So what we will see is basically, what we are seeing is basically the agents are getting this ability to self-critique and sort of make sure that every reasoning step is basically correct as well. Now, and that is sort of showing not just promise in mathematics and in programming, But in like cybersecurity, for example, you might have heard about this news of Claude Mythos and the ability of modern LLMs, like both like across the board, and they have been able to sort of find software vulnerabilities. And finding a software vulnerability requires a very long sort of trajectory of thinking and making sure that you do this step correct and this step correct and this step correct. And so after all these steps, the agent is now, these models have the ability to do all of these steps correct, and then finally sort of validate that I've been able to find that vulnerability in the program. So although previous generation of LLMs had that problem of not being able to sort of move ahead and through these hallucinations, the modern AI agents, I think, have made a lot more progress on that problem.
Maybe last question, because we're running out of time.
Hey, thanks. I would claim that one of the big differentiators between a junior researcher, a senior researcher, and an exceptional researcher is which questions to ask and which ideas to follow through on. And I think compared to math, where our validators are fast, in biology or theoretical physics, it might take decades and billions. So do you think all of arXiv is a good training data set for that question? And how far in their career would you say the agents are now?
Yeah, so I think there is this element of when the LLMs were being trained originally, there was this training element which was like collect a lot of data and train on it. But as we have progressed, there has been a lot more research that has gone into data curation on how do you select the right data for training the model, and is the data of the right quality. Basically, we don't want to sort of train the agent to believe in falsehoods and so on. But at the same time, as these models have expanded and the amount of data is larger, the models themselves also have been able to sort of come up with their own abilities of figuring out which data should be believed. Right? If something is an outlier, then it should not sort of try to explain it or basically try to ignore it in some sense. So, so I think these models are going to get better, right? But there will be an element of choosing the right data and curating the right data. So that is sort of important. There's this other sort of element of what is the right scientific question. That question of taste. I think a lot of, if you look at how a typical sort of PhD student or or a typical researcher spends their time today, they will spend most of their time on the how. How do you solve the problem? And I think the proportion of time that they will spend on the what will be much larger in the future compared to what it is today. So the what and the how balance of what is the problem I want to solve and how do I solve it, whatever the fraction is today, I think is going to shift towards the what. We will spend much more time in articulating the right problem and thinking about what is the right problem, right? And what are the implications of the problem if it is solved. Okay, thank you.
Just two things before you go. So the first thing, we have refreshment, and please come back at 11:45. And we have next session will be on solving gene regulation code. We have two speakers, and the two speakers, Peter and Carl, please come back here at 11:30 so we can do check things through.